Yeah.
Hank Williams Jr., that name gets you started real good in some ways, and it also closes the door in some other ways.
Being the son of the legendary Hank Williams, Hank Jr. grew up with the heavy responsibility of trying to carry on his father's music.
You were essentially doing your dad's act, right?
Oh, it was my idea without a doubt. My mother, I was on the road with her, but I couldn't wait to do it.
Kept doing his own thing no matter what. And when he tells me, I plugged in the guitar and half the crowd would leave and I would get booed and I'd get stuff thrown at me.
Absolutely.
Did Hank finally start talking about his dad's last night? And whatever he has revealed might not be what you all already know. He hints at something that got brushed aside or just never said out loud. This is the story of how Hank Williams Jr., at 76 years old, has finally opened up about the weight of his father's legacy and the tragic events of that final journey in December 1952.
They wanted any part of him they could get back, and I didn't have music on my mind very much. I'd go out.
You know what? He was so right about that.
Then after some marriages and divorces and things like that, then it got serious, I started writing some of my own things.
When Hank rebelled in his teenage years and began playing his own style of music, he became an outcast as many people in the country music industry turned their backs on him.
The son of country music's most legendary figure kept his deepest feelings private for decades, but in recent years, he's begun sharing the truth about what it meant to grow up as the child of Hank Williams Sr., and the toll that his father's final night has cast over his entire life.
Satisfy this person.
Yeah.
Or they'd say, well, sing this song. And I said, well, I don't know that. Well, you little so-and-so your daddy would have.
Oh, I see.
It would have been so easy for him to just crumble in those situations because people wanted him to sound like Hank and look like Hank and do all that. Just seeing.
Yeah. Do you have any resentment, or did you have any resentment at the time for your father's success when you were doing that?
Oh, no, not back then,
January 1st, 1953, Hank Williams Sr. passed away in the back seat of a Cadillac on a snowy West Virginia road at just 29 years old. His son, Randall Hank Williams, nicknamed Botsiphus by his father, was only 3.5 years old at the time. The circumstances surrounding that New Year's morning have been shrouded in mystery, controversy, and countless rumors. And now, Hank Williams Jr. is finally speaking candidly about how his father's final hours shaped his entire existence.
I'd like to be remembered as a good songwriter and not, well, he was great bluegrass or he was this or that. I don't want to be thought of like that.
Had him on a pedestal, and then I've got a song called Family Tradition. If I get stoned and sing all night long, that's a family tradition.
I'm not going to limit myself and say, I'm country and nothing else, or I'm Southern rock and I'm nothing else. That's baloney.
The king of hillbillies was what they called Hank Williams Sr., a country singer whose influence on American music cannot be overstated. Chronic pain from a spinal condition and struggles with substances that would ultimately contribute to his early passing marked his entire life. Growing up for young Hank Jr. meant being raised primarily by his mother Audrey after his father's sudden passing, and the nickname Botsiphus was one of the few personal connections he had to the father he barely knew. This wasn't just pressure to succeed, this was a roadmap to suffering that nearly destroyed him. Hospitalized as a young person for issues related to substances, Hank Jr. later admitted he even faced moments where he considered ending his own life, and the ghost of his father's legacy was almost fatal. To understand the weight Hank Jr. has carried, we need to examine the final hours of his father's life, and the details come primarily from Charles Carr, the college student who drove Hank Sr. on that fatal trip. In 2002, Carr gave detailed interviews and stated, "I'm certainly not an authority on Hank Williams, but I'm the only authority on Hank Williams' passing." December 30th, 1952, Hank Sr. and Charles Carr left Montgomery, Alabama, heading north for what should have been two performances, one in Charleston, West Virginia on New Year's Eve, and another in Canton, Ohio on New Year's Day. The Charleston show was canceled, but the Canton promoter insisted they make the 500-mile journey through dangerous, icy conditions. Fort Payne, Alabama was where Williams purchased a pint of bourbon, and years later, Hank Jr. would recall details from the stories he'd heard, including that his father bought bonded bourbon on that trip. They pushed through Alabama and Tennessee, fighting winter weather every mile of the way. Around 7 p.m. on December 31st, they checked into the Andrew Johnson Hotel in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Hank Sr. was in terrible physical condition by this point. Chloral hydrate and alcohol for pain management had been his routine, and that evening something happened that would seal his fate when a physician in Knoxville gave him multiple injections of morphine mixed with vitamin B12. 10:30 p.m. rolled around, and despite Hank Sr.'s exhausted state and the dangerous road conditions, the concert promoter insisted they leave immediately. Carr described Hank Sr. being so weak he was in a wheelchair, though he walked into the Cadillac under his own power, wearing his white boots and blue overcoat. Shortly after midnight, they stopped at a roadside gas station, possibly in Bristol, Tennessee, or Bluefield, West Virginia, and Carr offered Hank some food. According to Carr, Hank Williams Sr.'s final words to anyone were simple and heartbreaking when he said, "No, I just want to get some rest." Those would be the last words Hank Williams Sr. ever spoke. What happened during that overnight drive has been the subject of speculation for over 70 years. But according to Charles Carr, the truth is both simpler and sadder than the myths suggest. Icy, treacherous roads stretched ahead of them as they drove through the night. About an hour past midnight near Blaine, Tennessee, Carr was pulled over and received a speeding ticket. But despite everything, Carr later recalled that Hank Sr. was in better spirits than expected. They joked and sang songs together in the car, and Carr noted something significant about how Hank had a low tolerance for substances at that point and left several cans of beer unopened in the vehicle. The response to Hank Williams Sr.'s passing was unprecedented in every way. Montgomery received his body, which was transported to his mother Audrey's boarding house, where it lay in a silver casket for 2 days, and an estimated 15,000 to 25,000 mourners filed past to pay their respects. January 4, 1953 brought a funeral of the Montgomery Auditorium, which held 2,750 people, but thousands more stood outside in what was described as far larger than any event ever held in Montgomery, surpassing even Confederate President Jefferson Davis's inauguration. Country music legends Ernest Tubb, Roy Acuff, and Red Foley performed at the service singing "Beyond the Sunset," "I Saw the Light," and "Peace in the Valley." And Hank Sr. was buried in Oakwood Annex Cemetery in Montgomery, where his grave remains a pilgrimage site for fans. Around 6 a.m. on January 1, 1953, as they drove through the early morning darkness, Charles Carr noticed an eerie silence from the back seat and glanced back to see that the blanket had fallen off Hank Williams. Pulling over near Oak Hill, West Virginia, he found Hank Sr. lying with his left hand across his chest, stiff and cold. The 29-year-old legend had passed away sometime during the night, alone in the back of that Cadillac, never making it to the Canton show and never seeing another New Year's Day. Carr drove into Oak Hill seeking medical help, but hospital interns could only confirm what Carr already knew. Insufficiency of the right ventricle of the heart was listed as the official cause, attributed to his lifelong spinal condition combined with the strain of the substances in his system that night. Charles Carr spent the rest of his life debunking the wild stories that emerged, insisting that Hank Sr. was alive when they left Knoxville and walking into that Cadillac under his own power. The rumors that porters had placed a body in the car were, in his words, all bunk. And Carr said it best when he put it this way: "The story seems to get better as every year goes by." But Hank's life doesn't need to have anything added to it. It was sensational enough as it was. 3-year-old Bocephus lost his father that New Year's morning, which meant growing up with a legend instead of a dad. And the pressure on Hank Williams Jr. was relentless from the very beginning. People expected him to be his father, to sing like his father, to essentially become a reincarnation of the man he barely remembered. But even in the immediate aftermath, controversy swirled around the circumstances of his passing. The official explanation of heart failure worsened by substances didn't satisfy everyone, and a questionable physician named Horace Toby Marshall, who had treated Hank, speculated that Hank might have intentionally ended his own life, suggesting he had decided to destroy the Hank Williams that was making money. Marshall was later exposed for illegal prescriptions, and no evidence ever surfaced to support these claims. Billie Jean Jones, Hank's widow, refused to accept the official explanation and testified, "I have never accepted the report that my husband passed away from a heart issue." The doubts and rumors have persisted for over 70 years. Extensive reconstructive procedures and a long recovery followed the accident that left him severely injured, but something else happened during that recovery when Hank Jr. found himself. When he emerged from that ordeal, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life by refusing to try to be his father anymore. Forging his own path meant blending country with rock and blues, creating what became known as outlaw country, and in 1979, he released Family Tradition, a defiant anthem that acknowledged his heritage while asserting his independence. The transformation worked because Hank Jr. became a superstar in his own right with hits like A Country Boy Can Survive that had nothing to do with imitating his father. Breaking free from the shadow, or at least carving out his own space within it, finally happened. 1982 brought an appearance on Late Show with David Letterman where Hank Jr. summed up his struggle perfectly when he said it was fun for the little boy to do Hank Williams, but it was awful for the man. Performing his father's songs as a child brought joy, he described, but as he grew older, the weight of expectation became suffocating. The worst part was being told that suffering was a prerequisite for greatness, and people around him actually suggested that to match his father's genius, he would need to walk the same destructive path. For years, Hank Jr. nearly did exactly that, struggling with substances from a young age, facing hospitalization, and battling the same demons that had taken his father. Everything changed on August 8, 1975, when Hank Williams Jr. suffered a near-fatal fall while mountain climbing in Montana. 1989 brought an interesting full-circle moment when he used digital technology to create a duet with his father called There's a Tear in My Beer, combining existing recordings of Hank Sr. with his own performance. Country Music Video of the Year and a Grammy came from that video, but this time it was on his terms because it wasn't imitation, it was reconciliation. For decades, Hank Williams Jr. rarely spoke publicly about his father in any real depth, but in recent years, now in his mid-70s, he's begun opening up in ways he never did before. 76 years old, and Hank Jr. has started sharing the emotional truth about what it meant to carry the Williams name. Recent interviews have brought reflections on growing up without guidance on how to handle such an overwhelming legacy, and he said, "No one told me how to carry the weight," describing the isolation of being expected to honor a father he barely knew while simultaneously living up to impossible standards. Those dark years when he nearly followed his father's path to an early grave have become topics he's spoken more openly about, including the hospitalizations, the struggles, and the pressure that was drilled into him to suffer for his art. These aren't easy admissions, but they're honest ones. What makes Hank Jr.'s recent openness so powerful is that it comes from a place of survival and perspective because he's now older than his father ever got to be by nearly 50 years. The Country Music Hall of Fame inducted him in 2020, cementing his own legendary status separate from his father's. 5 children he's raised, including Hank III and his other kids, and he's become a grandfather who survived personal tragedies, including the loss of his daughter Catherine in a car accident in 2022. Mary Jane Thomas, his longtime wife, passed away in 2022, and he married longtime friend Brandy in September 2023, performing, managing his farm business in Tennessee, and living life on his own terms has continued for him. So what has Hank Williams Jr. finally revealed about his father's last night? And the truth is both simple and profound. New facts about the physical events of December 31st, 1952 haven't been uncovered by him, and the chronology remains as Charles Carr described it, with a desperate drive through icy conditions, a man too physically compromised to survive the journey, and a tragic ending in the back of a Cadillac. What Hank Jr. has revealed is the emotional truth about what that night meant for everyone left behind. And he's spoken about the weight of knowing his father's final hours were spent in pain, alone, and pushed to keep performing when his body was giving out. How that desperate drive mirrors the way the music industry can consume its artists, demanding everything until there's nothing left, has become part of his reflections. More than anything, Hank Jr. has broken his silence about the cost of grief and legend. Because for decades he was told to channel his father's pain and to embrace suffering as the price of greatness. What he's now saying publicly, what he couldn't say for years, is that this narrative nearly ended his life too. Today at 76, Hank Williams Jr. represents something his father never got the chance to be, which is an elder statesman of country music who's lived long enough to see his own children and grandchildren pursue music. Coleman Williams, his grandson, is now carrying on the family tradition into a fourth generation. The Hank Williams Museum in Montgomery houses the pale blue Cadillac that Hank Sr. passed away in, a silent witness to that tragic night. Charles Carr, before his own passing, visited that museum and even sat in the car again, remembering the young man he drove through the ice and snow while keeping mementos like the poster from the Canton concert that never happened and the cowhide gloves Hank Sr. gave him on that last trip. Oak Hill, West Virginia has a bronze plaque marking the spot where Hank Williams Sr. was pronounced gone, and fans still make pilgrimages to Montgomery, to the museum, and to the grave. Your Cheating Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, and I Saw the Light are songs that live on, with Hank Sr.'s music covered by countless artists across every genre. But perhaps the most important legacy is standing right there in Hank Williams Jr. himself, because he represents what his father never achieved, which is survival. Making it through the darkness that consumed Hank Sr. and finding a way to honor the past without being destroyed by it is what he's accomplished. Hank Williams Jr. finally breaking his silence about his father's last night isn't about revealing new details of what happened on that icy road in 1952, but rather, it's about revealing what it meant to grow up in the aftermath of that tragedy, to carry a name that felt more like a burden than a blessing, and to nearly lose himself trying to live up to a legend. No, I just want to get some rest were Hank Sr.'s final words, and he never got that rest on January 1st, 1953. But in speaking out now at 76, Hank Williams Jr. is perhaps giving both of them a kind of peace by saying that it's okay to step out of the shadow, it's okay to survive, and it's okay to tell the truth about how hard it all was. The last night of Hank Williams Sr. has echoed through decades, shaped careers, inspired countless songs, and left wounds that took a lifetime to heal. But in finally breaking his silence, Hank Williams Jr. has done something his father never got the chance to do, which is tell his own story in his own words, on his own terms. And maybe that's the real family tradition worth preserving.